What's up, everybody? You're listening to episode 2 of the PS Files, a podcast that investigates the biggest stories shaping PlayStation and gaming as a whole. Each week, we open a new case file to examine the games, news, and moves surrounding PlayStation and what it could all signal for you. I'm your host, Marco, and joining me is my good friend and co-host, Pablo.
What's going on, Marco?
Pretty good, man. All good. This week, we got a lot to talk about. Our case file contains the rise of Marathon, the fall of Highguard, the arrival of Xbox's Project Helix, and the future of PlayStation's PC strategy, all with zero Sony Pony nonsense. And what does that mean? It means we're not here for console war theater, y'all. We're just here to have some good open dialogue about where gaming's going. So if you're here to see if we're going to be scandalous about Project Helix, let's just call out the elephant in the room. It's not going to happen. We're going to be constructive about it because we're not that style. We're not that way.
You said console war theory. That's going to be a damn class in some college in a couple of
one day,
years.
Someday, man.
Yeah.
That's going to be a whole book right there. What happened to us? Man, it's getting worse. I thought console warring in 2026 would have died out a little bit, as the landscape changed, but I think people are still kind of reaching for something to latch onto, and it makes it hard for especially a new podcast like ours to kind of dive in without a lot of expectations around, okay, are you going to go to bat for PlayStation? Are you on our team? It gets very territorial like that.
Yeah, the tribalism is real.
It's hard, man. I mean, I get it. We all root for our favorite sports teams. There are good guys, but this is, this is a different space, So I just think a lot, the aggression levels are just still out of control out here.
To cut yourself off from any avenue of entertainment just because they don't sport the brand that you like is crazy.
Needless to say, that's not what we are here to do at all. We're here to have some good grown conversations about PlayStation, gaming as a whole. So listen in, have a good time, follow our show if you're down, and let's get it rolling. And look, man, our case file is pretty stacked. We have a tall order today, and one of the big ones we wanted to talk about is the topic of Marathon up, Highguard down. It's getting crazy out here, man, and already in the short time Marathon's been out, Marathon's been called a lot of things since it launched. It's been called cluttered, obtuse, sweaty, and slop, all the way to underrated, promising, addictive, and fun. So I think it's safe to say that when all is said and done this year, Marathon will go down as one of the most divisive games of 2026 by far.
Yeah, most likely it will. It's because it operates in a genre that, like you said, Marco, people are really about picking up the next Concord when they're talking about it. Like they want to be first on the scene to preach the demise of a game that they've not played, which is insane to me,
Yeah. And to that point, not only is it one of the most divisive games, but it's also one of the most watched because seemingly by the hour, we've got people screenshotting Steam DB player counts and posting it to Twitter with these bold declarations coming from every angle about its future. Some say it's thriving. Some say it's going to be dead in 6 months. So people are kind of like placing more bets about the game than actually talking about what it even is. So I think, we're going to try to cut through that noise and just be a little bit more Marathon centric and not so much what's happening around it, because I don't think it's worth dignifying a lot of that stuff going on out there. I just don't think it's worth it. Now, I've put in some decent amount of time. I put in about maybe 10, 11 hours into it. I think you're kind of just testing the waters while you have time right now.
Yeah, I'm definitely testing the waters with Marathon to see where we're at, just to kind of have that point in history where I'm like, okay, I remember how this game was, and I'm interested to see what it is later. Yeah,
that's very true. I think anytime you talk about a live service game, and we play many of them. We've been Overwatch stands. We've played a lot of Rainbow Six Siege. You know innately that they are going to transform over time. And you have to be open-minded to that process. You can't expect the whole payload to be dumped out in front of you in week one of a new live service game. That's just not a realistic expectation. Now, there are some things that a live service game does have to prove to you early, but that's more on like the mechanical side, the meta side. Do I know what I'm supposed to be doing here? Does this make sense in my brain? And then when it comes to like the stuff around it, like, battle pass content and seasonal content, things like that, I think that's where you have to not so much give grace, but just kind of allow things to kind of breathe and allow things to kind of get up and running, as it were. So,
and it doesn't matter how good the core game is, because it is made to last. It has to change in order to keep people interested in it,
Yeah.
And there's certain things that happen, certain strategies that people come up with that have to either be countered or fixed, So the key word is live. It's a live game, and it's always going to be changing. So yeah, like you said, there's got to be a thing to catch you, but it's always going to change. Like you said, open-minded is the way to come into these games.
Yeah, and I think that's the way that I approached it too. And honestly, and I think I can speak on your behalf as well, not a lot of extraction shooter experience.
Right.
I never actually played Arc Raiders either. I was borderline on trying it out, but I was like, you know what? I'm more interested in seeing what Marathon's doing because I like the aesthetic more, like the sci-fi thing more. Could be more of a Marco kind of game. But I came into it like, you know what? I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know if this is even going to grab me, but I've been pleasantly surprised, I would say. I think that for as divisive as it is, my time with it has been pretty straightforward in that, though not without its flaws, I think it's one of the most fascinating multiplayer games I've played in years, and I am enjoying it for what it is. And I think there's 3 key things, Pablo, that elevate it for me personally. And that's aesthetic, mechanics, and progression. I think those are the main 3 things. On the aesthetic side of things, and I think you can definitely attest to this, one of the most artistically and visually arresting sci-fi games I've ever seen, from faction figureheads to environments, loading screens, and everything in between. It just feels like it is very, very steeped in what it wants to do, almost unapologetically.
I think that they had a vision, and I think that they executed on that vision really well. And it really is just a visually, I would even say, stunning game to look at, because I think that the art style is particularly interesting. And that's one thing that I don't think that you can really see from trailers. You have to actually immerse yourself. It's an immersive experience in terms of what their vision is, and once you're in it, how it all plays out and how it all looks. It's really interesting what they did there. Not really what I expect from Bungie.
Yeah, with the way they do sci-fi traditionally with Halo, with Destiny, is almost more straightforward and cleaner.
Yeah.
This is intentionally glitchier and more scuffy and more like corporatized with these futuristic companies that they're kind of putting in front of you. And they are very bold in the way that those factions are visually represented and how things in the actual environment of Tau Ceti is represented. And it's not for everybody. I think if you're not into that kind of palette or that kind of look and feel, it might be a little too vibrant than what you might want out of a sci-fi game. But I think it's a really bold choice, and I really can't say that I've ever seen anything quite like it. And I like it for that. Yeah,
I would say I think the closest comp that I can probably give it is Cyberpunk 2077. I think that's like, the intro screen to Cyberpunk, how there's a radio going on in the back and there's like lights flashing. I think that's the closest comp to it, but it's constantly happening.
It's always there, and I think that's what I love about the unapologetic side of it. Now, I do think sometimes it gets in its own way and kind of trips over its own feet with being approachable in certain respects, particularly with the UI, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think the overall aesthetic is in a great place, and I would say the same thing about part 2 of what I was saying elevates the game, which is mechanics. Easily the best first-person shooter mechanics in all of gaming, in my opinion. I don't think Bungie has lost a step at all here. Guns feel amazing, movement feels tight, abilities all feel useful, runners each seem to serve their purpose and feel distinct. And so every time I get in that game, I feel like it's never actively working against me, When I pick up a gun, I'm like, you know what? This is not going to be a case of bad design. This is really going to be tuned the way I can actually trust. And I'm able to work creatively around what this game allows me to do out there. And I've had some really, really fun dynamic moments where the gameplay just all seems to click and I'm able to chain certain things together, abilities into squad kills and stuff like that. And it's very, very rewarding. And I think they've done a tremendous job of making sure that the flow of the game, not just mechanically, but with the overall loop, is in a really good place. So as you expose yourself more to the game, probably in the future, Pablo, you're going to get a better feel for that. But it's definitely in a good place.
Yeah, I mean, even now, like the gunplay, it feels impactful. It's like crispy FPS, like what you would that you definitely would expect from Bungie. And I think I know this is not part of your 3 pillars, but I think another thing that I've noticed that is really like interesting and doing an incredible job of like immersing you is the audio of it all too. I think the audio is really, really, really good. Even with the shooting, obviously the guns sound great, but just the music and the ambiance, I think they nail that shit really, really good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's presentation overall is huge there, and I think they've definitely done well with audio cues and stuff like that. There's some things to tweak, I think, with like footsteps and stuff, and just
sure.
the sound of looting happening across the map and stuff like that. There's a lot of bleeps and bloops going on, and I think some of them need to be a little bit more distinct. But I do agree that I think overall sound quality there is in a great place, and definitely agree with you there. Great add-on. And I would say the third thing that I mentioned, progression. I think it's been a very challenging yet rewarding sense of progression with unlocks that don't leave you high and dry, but don't necessarily hold your hand either. What I like is a lot of people assume, especially if you're not really experienced with extraction shooters like I was, that well, you die, you lose everything, you're starting over all the time. And what the game really does a good job of is helping you kind of lift your baseline up of like things that you can do, little perks, advantages that you have that you can unlock through doing contracts with the factions that kind of continue to move the needle in the good direction for you to not be as behind the 8 ball with, running out of things that you need, weapons, ammo, stuff like that. You can start working out things with them where you can buy guns from them directly, make trades, things like that. So you're not really ever scraping the bottom of the barrel, as it were. So there's a really good sense of forward movement in that way, but not to the point where it's just doing all the job for you, and you don't feel like you have anything to lose. You can still be ass out, titty swinging out here, Pablo. It's if you come into a run and you're like, oh man, I'm feeling good. I just exfilled 3 straight games. I'm good. Man, give me my purple gun. Give me my blue this. You will get wiped out of existence, and you'll turn that system off and be like, man, fuck this game. But it's really just about, the game does still encourage that self-discipline though, right? Of like, okay, I'm doing well, but I need to kind of let me chill a little bit here before I lose all my stuff. So it's got a really good balance in that way that I've come to appreciate a lot.
I saw something online where sometimes the enemies will use the in-voice chat to bait you. So it's little things like that they're always like ramping up the challenge, even in game, Yeah,
a lot of meta-related stuff is taking shape right now in real time, which has been really fascinating. We've got like exfil campers now. We've got people who are purposely not doing proximity chat. They're staying quiet on comms. They're just doing party chat instead to, keep you from knowing they're close by. So a lot of stuff's happening around the game right now, which I think is really fascinating to see just how the community starts to kind of not quite dictate the way the game goes, but in a similar way to what Arc Raiders turned out to be, where people were like, no, we're going to be friendly here. There could be a push towards the complete opposite direction here now with Marathon, where it's like, no, this is take your friendly ass back to Arc Raiders. We're gonna do everything we can to take all your shit. So I love that the community is embracing the other side of the coin the way they are, and that's making the meta very interesting to see unfold. So
that's awesome.
It's been really cool, man. I would say there are definitely some opportunities though. I think Bungie can improve the UI, like we talked about earlier. Clarifying what some of the in-game resources are actually for, because that can get a little obtuse at times, and making the rewards pass a bit more compelling. And I would also say maybe looking to make the narrative a little bit more front and center and less investigative, where you're kind of looking for a needle in the haystack sometimes, getting these little bits and pieces of things. Because I think they have a lot of really rich lore to work with here, and they've set up a great foundation. So I hope that with future seasons, there's more cinematics, there's more things that are, kind of anchoring the world with more of that heaviness and more of like the mystery of what's going on kind of coming to the surface a bit more. But I would say overall, I think it's a great option if you're up for an extraction shooter that isn't trying to be an Arc Raiders clone. I think that's very important. Just be willing to put in the investment, put in the time.
Yeah.
And I think as many people are learning, especially as the server slam proved, you can't just play this game for 10 minutes and expect to know it all and what it has to offer. And that's why I think I'm starting to see it, and I don't know if you have it too, but like more and more people are slowly walking back some of their negative takes and admitting that they kind of jumped the gun.
A lot of retrospective YouTube videos like we were wrong about Marathon or you were wrong about Marathon, like things like that. As people play more and kind of start to understand the game more, they're really they're sharing those experiences as well. So it's not all negative, I mean, it's more the majority of it, if you go online, you think that this game is absolute garbage, but that's just the echo chamber that these people are in, and that's not true at all. I think we have to remember, don't sleep on Bungie, man. Bungie is talented as hell.
Yeah, I think they've been, and not to say that they haven't done some things to earn a punch in the mouth,
Sure,
like,
of course.
They absolutely have done a lot of wrong. But I think that the turnaround with this game in particular has been really nice to see. And I'd love to see this game thrive for a couple of years. I don't think it's got, a 10-year lifespan ahead of it or anything like that. I don't know if it needs to be that big of a deal, but I think it's just going to be fun to watch to see how this game evolves over time. But that involves people not being so obsessed with Steam numbers. You know what I mean? Like, what do you think about that side of it specifically? I mean, I think we'd be doing a disservice to the conversation if we don't address kind of the rise in the Steam DB watch with a lot of games these days. What do you think about that, dude?
I mean, I think it's just bad actors and people being disingenuous or people who don't really understand how that works, in that especially a game like this that's out on consoles, it's out on PC. The Steam numbers are such a small, well, not small, but it's just a part of what the success of that game is. And so I think it's fine to look at that and be like, as a barometer, like, okay, people are playing it, people are not playing. Obviously, you see Steam numbers at 2,000, then you understand where it's telling a story, but it's not the complete story, And I think a lot of people are using that as the end all be all, which is not it. They'll compare this game to, well, this game was doing 1 million concurrent players around the same time that it released, but it's not about the peak. It's about maintaining a strong number there. I just think that people use those numbers to tell a story, but really it's incomplete if that's all you're using.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It tells a chapter of the story, doesn't tell the whole story.
Right.
And I don't think that... I think the real damage it's doing is it's making people straddle the fence. Of like, I don't know if I should support the game because at 10 o'clock last night, the numbers dipped down to 44,000. It's dying. And that kind of Death Watch mentality is taking, I think, a lot of people away from what is actually a pretty neat game. And I would say to that point, like if you are one of those people who's kind of like straddled the fence so hard that the damn neighbors are watching you, I would say, man, listen, first of all, settle down. Second of all, get off the damn fence. You're going to have an imprint that thing up your ass. And thirdly, I think if you think this is another Highguard in the making, understand that this is a very different situation compared to what happened there. And I think that kind of leads us into talking about the part 2 of this, which is Highguard down. I think there's a lot of ways to tackle this one, because we can talk about what we think went wrong, which we should. But also, I think a lot of the assumptions people make that the story of Concord and the story of Highguard is the story of Marathon and the story of the next game and the next game. And just people kind of almost being a little bloodthirsty for another one. Yeah. You know what I mean?
So people are calling the demise of all these games as soon as they come out, and they do it to every game, and not even live service games. But when a game does the thing that they were talking about, they take all the credit. And the problem here is the live service genre is such a volatile genre to begin with. And then you have 2 examples of games literally dying weeks, months from it being released. And people are using that as this is exactly what's going to happen to every single live service game, which is absolutely not true. And putting it on Marathon as the next DOA game, it's a redundant way to look at this. You should be wanting every game to be successful and not just sitting there waiting for this game to die so you could jump on Twitter and be like, I told you so. When really, if you go back to their timeline, they've been saying that about every single game to ever release, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, dude, and tell me if you agree, I think games like this have to be treated on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
I don't think that one failure should inform you about the next game's potential, if that makes sense, right? Like, just because Concord failed doesn't mean that every future PlayStation Live service game is destined for the same fate. Now, it does raise questions and concerns, but it's never a guarantee, right? And so just because a game like Highguard, which is what we're going to talk about now, has failed very prolifically, doesn't mean that anything that is even remotely like Highguard in the slightest is going to suffer the same fate.
Yeah.
People just kind of assume that everything is an apples to apples comparison, and it just isn't. Because when you look at Highguard's whole storyline, the whole timeline of it, it was weird from the start in ways that you can't compare with Marathon, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you go right to the start of it all, right?
Yeah.
Jeff Keighley.
Let's tackle that elephant in the room.
Jeff Keighley, welcome to Highguard. You're like, okay, man. All right. And we get this trailer, dude. And, but I mean, dude, that's where it all started.
You know, it's weird because when he announced that game as the last game of the Game Awards, usually people are expecting something big there, right? That's usually the spot for like a big reveal, you know,
well-known IP or something. Yeah.
And so when he announced this, automatically people were like, what the hell is this? Because I don't think that trailer did the game any justice or really explain much. It just, you know, some characters on horses shooting bows and arrows, and people are like, I'm not really understanding what this is. On top of that, the studio behind this did nothing with that. Even though it might not have been the best way to present the game, they did nothing with the Jeff Keighley push. But
no, they went quiet.
Yeah, they went quiet. So it was all amalgamation of that. But I think Jeff Keighley was the beginning of the end almost, you know? And then we find out things later on about Tencent actually being involved. And maybe this wasn't,
That killed me, dude. When I saw that, I'm like, oh my God. You're one of the major companies that help fund and the Game Awards and all of his stuff is ironically getting the last reveal. So it fired off a lot of neurons in my head. It makes it, and I've got a question for you, but I want you to get to what you got here. When I
saw that, a small part of me was thinking, wow, Jeff really went out of his way to see something that he thought could be the next big thing. And I felt kind of, not bad, but I felt kind of like, man, you guys are being a little too harsh on Jeff.
You would think it was like an earnest type of intention,
because the way he talked about it, never mentioned Tencent, you know, it was all about, I saw this game and I thought, holy shit, this is going to be the next big thing, was basically what he was saying, right? And he was like, I'm so happy to show this to you guys. Like, you know, we're about to blow your minds. And it didn't blow our minds, but it's still in the back of my head, I'm like, he saw it. He liked it. There's got to be something there. And then the Tencent thing comes out, and I'm like, you son of a bitch.
You dirty dog. You dirty bitch.
You dirty dog. He says that he didn't make him pay for the spot, but that's because Tencent already gave your ass some money for that thing. It felt really bad. And it just reinforced everything that I think about Jeff Keighley, unfortunately, all over again, you know?
Let me just kind of ask the question, right? And this is, I think at this point, the question, even though I wouldn't typically ask this type of question, I think it's justified.
Okay.
How much of a percent blame do you put on Jeffrey Keighley?
I would say about 10%, and I'll tell you why. We talked about live service games, and we talk about volatility, right, of the genre.
Yeah.
Tencent, knowing this, pulling funding on that game, firing everybody weeks into its launch without giving that game a fair shake, you know? I would put 90% of the blame on Tencent, on the fact that they had Jeff do what he did, and then seemingly when people were bashing the game and not really playing as the game to the numbers that they seemed that were satisfactory, completely bailed on it. And I feel like when I look at those numbers, they were bad, but they weren't Concord bad. You know, they could have done something. The 5v5 stuff, I think, you know, got them a little bit of an uptick in numbers. It just, to me, it just feels like they never gave that studio a chance, even before the game came out. I just felt like they were already defeated without pushing them to do any kind of marketing, without giving any marketing budget, any additional money to market the game. It feels to me like Tencent really is to blame here at 90%, really, if I'm looking at that. What do you think?
I think I might be on the other side of it, because I think that I'm mentally putting Jeff Keighley and Tencent together, right? Because of the connection that's there. So I think that part of it is that relationship between the two. So my number for Jeff Keighley is significantly higher blame-wise than yours was. I'm probably at about 40% Jeff Keighley.
Okay.
Because, you know, in his position, he has a responsibility to not just go out there and trot out Jeff Keighley's favorite things, right? So even if this was a matter of like just a real earnest interest in this game and wanting to spotlight it, there's ways to do that responsibly that don't create more havoc for all parties than what ended up happening. But then when you add in the Tencent factor to the equation, now my brain goes in 1,000 different directions, and most of them are all around like kind of, you know, these weird sort of agreements under the table kind of stuff. And that's maybe a little too tinfoil hat here, but I go a little bit more in the direction of thinking there's got to be something more to this, because you wouldn't put this game in that spot and it just be for earnest reasons. So I think he's got a lot more to do with it. Honestly.
Here's my thing on that. It's their original plan was to shadow drop it in January, like out of nowhere, and hope people, you know, I guess gravitate towards it. People who did Apex, right? There were some people who worked on Apex, if I'm not mistaken.
Titanfall.
And I think that it worked out for Apex, and I think that's what they kind of were trying to recreate. But do you think it was better? For me, it felt like at least they got to be on the biggest stage of video games in the current form, versus them coming out of nowhere and shadow dropping a game that nobody's expecting. I'm sure there'll be some curiosity, but I just feel like they did absolutely nothing with the presentation. Regardless of why the presentation was there, the fact that nothing was done with it just feels like a failure on that company rather than the spokesperson of a show, where you and I know that there's probably some kind of deal that happened backdoor-wise, but at the end of the day, I just felt like you've been given the biggest gift that you can possibly give into your game that nobody knows about, and then whether it was your choice or Tencent not giving you enough money or marketing budget to do what you need to do with that, it just felt like they completely dropped the ball.
I think my sympathy for Wildlight might be a little different than maybe your sympathy towards them, because I look at it more from a standpoint of, to get the amount of backlash they got after that reveal, going quiet kind of made sense to me. You know, like I would be afraid to say a peep after something like that, and just maybe need to regroup for a couple of weeks and say, okay, we need to figure this out. And maybe they just didn't know where to go from there, and that made things difficult. But I think that's where my sympathy comes in, because what do you do against the entire internet, right? Do you try to swing back? It's a futile attempt. So I felt like them going silent, it to me was a necessary evil, in my opinion, more so than a wasted opportunity, because that's a hard thing to claw back from, is the entire Twitter community and YouTube comment section just barreling down on you like that. So I don't fault them for that so much. As the game itself, I fault them for.
Right. But if Tencent gave a fuck, they would have delayed that game.
Well, Tencent, I've never mistaken them for giving a fuck about anything.
Right. So, and that's kind of my point, where it's like, if they gave a shit about the success of this game in any way, after seeing that, and if you take the way of, like you said, of staying silent, because what can you say to make it better? Nothing? Okay. Why not just delay that game and let the conversations die down a little bit, you know? I think as soon as that game was announced, the usual suspects online had their target on that game, ready to go. We are waiting for this game to release, to scream on the top of a mountain, DOA, dead on arrival. Yeah. And I think if you would have delayed it a little bit, kind of like what happened with Marathon last year, you know? Some backlash there. They delayed it to now, and the backlash is still there, but it's less, you know. And I feel like they're more successful for it. Yeah,
I mean, I think at the end of the day, though, a not so good game is a not so good game. Yeah. And you know, whether they had to force the issue and put it out at a certain time or not, I do think that there was enough. I had heard enough from Wildlight's leaders and leaders of the project to know that they believed strongly in it, and I believed in their passion about the project, but they were just terribly misguided. So I put, if I'm giving 40% to Jeff/Tencent, I'm giving the other 60 to them for just not really reading the room and making the kind of game that people want to play. And that goes to the art style of the game, which was woefully generic. I thought this mix match of different live service games all in one just felt very unfocused and scatterbrained. It never felt cohesive. Weren't enough players on the map. It was dead. It was empty. It was just very much a sleepy game pretending to be something it wasn't. And then you find out later that they kind of screwed with the trailer a little bit to kind of make it look more action-packed than it really was. They were intentionally respawning characters right after they got shot in the first part of a clip to come right back. And it's like, well, that's not what happens in the actual game. So they were kind of selling you a false bill of goods there, just with the intensity of the game not being there. So I put a lot of it, or in this case, the majority of it, at their feet, because at the end of the day, you can push through a lot of things that are happening on the corporate side of it, on the business side of it, if your game can deliver. And they just didn't come through in that way either, honestly.
And that's true. And I think that's the biggest thing at the end of the day, where if the game just isn't good, it isn't good. You know, if it's as good as if it's really good, it would transcend conversations and people's feelings about the game if it really is that good. And it wasn't. But I'm just tired of these huge companies coming in and picking up these creators and these people who want to do something good and people who are really passionate, and then just pulling funding. Like it just happened with Nagoshi Studios with the Gang of Dragon, the creator of Yakuza.
Yeah, man, pulled. That's crazy.
Yeah, pulled because they needed more money. Yeah, they're making games, man. I'm just tired of all this shit. These big corporations seemingly are doing more damage than good.
Yeah, I try these days, dude. I try really hard to not be cynical or pessimistic about the industry.
Yeah.
But the industry does not make that easy sometimes, man. It gets so depressing and deflating to see good teams get broken up, great projects in the making get canceled or compromised. There's just so much fuckery going on, man. It's hard to watch at times. It really is.
Yeah, it's a hard cycle because it's hard to get funding on your own. So then here comes Tencent, here comes NetEase swooping down. Hey, we're gonna give you $50 million to make your dream game, and you're like, holy shit! And then your dream game lasts a month. That's rough.
I think at the very least, Marathon is in a good place. It's not going to take the world by storm. I don't think it's not going to be one of those, cultural phenomenon type of experiences like a Helldivers or a Arc Raiders or, what we've seen on the, with the mainstays, the Fortnites of the world and stuff. But it might carve out its own little audience and hang in there pretty well. So
there's a space for that. I've been playing Rainbow Six Siege since 2015. There's little pockets where things can live for a long time, as long as 100%. People support it. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and move on. But before we do, Pablo, if you're enjoying the show so far, first of all, thank you. We're a new podcast, as you can see, episode 2. So we're still out here, just cutting our teeth, getting ourselves out there. So if you're enjoying yourself, the best way to support us is to follow our show wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Only take you a couple seconds, but it would mean the world to us. And of course, if you want more PlayStation takes and nostalgia, check us out on Threads and Instagram at the PS Files. But Pablo, it's time to move on, if I can English today, to our next topic. And boy, this is another loaded one, isn't it? I mean, we've got a lot of things changing in the strategy of PlayStation.
Yep.
And we've got a lot of things changing in the direction of Xbox. And one of the things that we do embrace here at the PS Files is talking about the competition, because you cannot tell the story of PlayStation without telling the story of their competition.
Absolutely.
And regardless of whether you think Xbox is viable competition or hardly competition, we still want to acknowledge their moves, because it does show us a little bit more about what we're trying to learn about where the industry's heading, especially when it ladders up to PlayStation,
And especially when it's so split in terms of what each company thinks the future of video games is,
Yeah. Very different philosophies. And in a way, I kind of like that, though, because I think styles make fights, because everybody's got their own angle. And I think that makes things really interesting from a consumer standpoint, because you've got a better chance of finding something that kind of aligns with you more than just watching 2 or 3 competitors do the same thing, but in just slightly different ways. Now they're more different than ever. And I kind of like that, if that makes sense.
And especially between Xbox and PlayStation, each of them coming from a different place, PlayStation being the leader, the tastemaker, as it will, and Xbox coming from behind. They're still trying to regain the glory days of Xbox 360 and do it in their own way without having to directly compete with PlayStation. I think that's super interesting as well.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us to talking PlayStation here, because they're making some changes.
Oh yeah,
they're making some changes. We kind of talked about it briefly in our first episode, but now with the Bloomberg article from Jason Schreier going live and them talking about just sort of the change in strategy with scaling back or outright eliminating PS5 ports coming to PC, I think now it's kind of hitting home that this is definitely a very significant change in direction for the brand and the business of PlayStation. And I'm really curious to kind of unpack with you what we think this signals and maybe what we think went wrong with this whole plan in the first place, because a lot of people are speculating sales and just the overall capabilities of pulling off something like PC games and ports. Where do you kind of land on this one, though?
Yeah, I mean, when I heard the news, I thought it was crazy, honestly, because when you look at the numbers of units sold or whatever, you think, okay, they're at least making something, an additional thing. But when you look into the numbers a little deeper, you realize that I think one time since they started doing this, it was like, I think Q4 2023, the highest percentage impact was 5% to the revenue. Like they made 5% more money. That was the highest that they've ever made for a PC port. So you're like, okay, so I don't think PlayStation is interested in sacrificing sales of their hardware, which is what their bread and butter, for 5%. Now, 5% is significant when you're dealing in the millions and billions of dollars, but they're still cutting their nose off to spite their face when it comes to console sales, because they're not. A 5% dip in console sales, let's just say those numbers, is way more significant than a 5% increase in PC sales for their software. So it makes a lot of sense once you really take a look at it. I'm shocked about how little the impact was to PC, because I would have thought PC players wanted to play these PlayStation exclusive games as bad as I thought they did, but they're not buying games. Not like that.
Yeah, and I think that's probably because the cadence of releases on PC were never really in a good place to begin with. I think by the time a lot of them came out, it was well after the fact. And let's be honest, a lot of PC gamers probably have at least a PS5 sitting around that they might play if they don't want to wait. Like they probably will do the same thing for GTA 6 as a prime example. So I can see a lot of them going, well, if I want to play this, I'll just get it on PS5 now. And if they got a good PC port down the road, I'll double dip or something down the road. But a lot of times that probably doesn't happen because other games start coming out at around that time. And, you look at it now, for instance, it's not a first party game per se, but Death Stranding 2 is finally coming to PC on the 19th. And I don't know what that's going to really do. Even though it's only been a couple months, it would have been much better for that to be a day and date release. Yeah. But they played around with console exclusivity. And of course you have the bandwidth of studios not always being able to pump out these games as quickly on PC as they might have liked. And you just kind of end up missing the boat.
Yeah. And I think also if you're a PC player who is waiting for the release of a PlayStation exclusive game, you have to also contend with the fact that you cross your fingers and hope it's a good port, because
that's true. Yeah.
There've been some ports from these games that have not been good at all. And so there's that to contend with as well. So I think there's just a lot of, when PlayStation was looking at the pros and cons, I just think ultimately the cons were a little too much for them. And I think there's an added bonus here as well, which we'll talk about a little later about, Xbox and the ability of them being able to play some of those Sony games on the console. So,
that was definitely talked about, but I'm just kind of thinking through things in real time here, and I'm kind of asking myself, we're kind of getting back to a walled garden again, right? Where we've kind of heard for maybe 1 or 2 years at this point, it's about taking the walls down. It's about everyone being able to access their games everywhere. But I think that there's just a business side of it that might be exposing a reality that exclusivity might still mean more in this era than I think people might have first thought. As great as it is to see everyone be able to access certain games where they like to play, that these are still businesses at the end of the day that want to see the numbers go up, and they don't want to sacrifice that just for the sake of 300,000 more people on PC being able to play their game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can't kumbaya your shit through this. Like, it's to have everything on everything, every game to release on every console. That sounds nice, but like you said, these are businesses, and PlayStation's main sort of approach to console gaming is sell the hardware, deliver the games, right? And they're not going to sacrifice hardware because the hardware feeds into their revenue, which feeds into their studios. You know, they're not going to mess with their cycle of money, because just to be like, let's have the people on the other side of that wall garden, like you said, to experience a God of War game. They don't care about that. They care about making money, and I think that they tried it on PC to see where it would lead them. They may not have given the best shake in terms of not releasing these games day and date, but at the end of the day, like we said, they're not sacrificing hardware sales for that either. So, you know, this makes sense, you know, and I think people don't like to hear that, because they're like, oh, you're just capping for a corporation. It's not capping. We are simply being factual and looking at what these things really mean, numbers overall. And I think that that's just what this is. This is an economical decision that makes total sense when you look at the numbers.
It also makes me have to give credit where credit's due to Nintendo. If I'm going to be honest, I don't love Nintendo and how they operate either in certain ways, but I think by them just kind of staying the course strategically and saying everything that is Nintendo can only be on Nintendo. There used to be a time where that was like a no duh, but we've been in a time for the last few years where that's been called more and more into question. And I think they've shown just by staying the course that you can still drive people to your console as long as you're doing your part and putting out games that people actively want to play. And you're just being consistent about that so that you're never leaving room for doubt.
Right.
And so I think that's probably the one thing I would knock PlayStation for, is they were never really clear on the extent of the PC strategy. They were never clear on the cadence of the PC strategy. It was just kind of a blob of things that if it happens, it happens. If it comes out, it comes out. And I just don't know if that ever really had any potential of getting anyone interested in switching to PC because they know they can count on PlayStation games being there, or things like that.
Yeah.
So, and I would also say it does, however, put a lot of pressure on Sony now. Yeah. Because if you are going to wall up the garden again, you got to make sure the fruit in there tastes like something good and not something you can grab at a local Wawa or some shit like that. You know what I mean? Like,
people swear by Wawa, man.
The games have to deliver if you're going to do this, right? Especially if Xbox, you know, by some stretch of the imagination pulls or scales back their multi-platform strategy, because then you can't rely on Xbox games to keep your consumers fed. So you'd have to stand toe-to-toe with the largest publisher in the world in that scenario, and I don't know that a slew of God of War and Horizon spinoffs can contend with that, per se, and what you're obviously trying to do from the live service point that we talked about earlier. So they're going to have to be careful. Yeah. If you want people back in the walled garden, it's got to be worth their while, and that hopefully puts more of a fire under their asses to do their part.
I hope that's part of the planning. I hope that they looked at the future of their first party studios, see what they have down the pike, see what kind of creative decisions they've made, and they go, we got some fire coming. So I think that it's a good time as any to build that wall back up, because I think what's coming down is going to be pretty good. So yeah, but then again, you look at what PlayStation thinks is good, and lately it's God of War and Horizon. So I hope that they're not doubly tripling down on that, and what we get is just more of that. More Marvel games, more of the same in a different flavor. That would I think be not great, because fatigue is real. People will be fatigued by that stuff. That's all. They're constantly and consistently getting the same cycle of games over and over.
Yeah, that's what I was saying to you last week about the Assassin's Creeding of
Yeah.
these franchises, where it's just too much, and you're like, oh my god, do we need one every year? Do we really need one every year? And now, even now, as we find out, Cory Barlog's next project is God of War related. That changes a lot of my excitement towards his project, because man, he's been away from the mainline games for like 8 years working on this project, and come to find out it's just another flavor of God of War. So, I mean, I'm sure the game's going to be great. I trust his work, but it does, to your point, come back to portfolio and saying, okay, I get why you want to kind of milk your moneymakers, but you also still need to have a little bit more going on the creative side, on like the new IP side of the spectrum, to keep people interested in what's next, and not just more of the same thing.
Because that's been my biggest complaint of PlayStation for the last few years, is that these studios may have names like Sony Santa Monica, but they are the God of War studio. Insomniac is the Marvel studio. Sucker Punch is the Ghost Tsushima studio. Like, they seem to be each studio stuck in the one IP cycle, which I hope they can break out of it. And obviously, I think that, they have the talent to do that with Naughty Dog, now with Intergalactic. I think that it's there for the taking. I think that they can do this, but it's just a little scary when, the Harvard Hults of the world, and I hope that they're not looking at this IP sold millions of copies. Let's just do that again.
Yeah. But that does bring us to, their competition. Let's talk about Xbox. Now, we're going to caveat this whole part of it by saying we're not an Xbox podcast, you guys, but we're not going to be unfair to Xbox. So if you skipped all the way to this part of it, letting you know now, we're not doing the fanboy nonsense. We're not going to get toxic on you guys. We have a respect and appreciation for what Xbox does, contrary to what some Sony ponies out there might feel. We don't like attacking like that. We just want to kind of unpack what they're doing. And what they're doing is Project Helix, man. So we don't know a lot about Project Helix, but I think in typical Xbox rumor mill fashion, there's a lot of things swirling around this project of sorts. What we do know from Asha Sharma is that they're looking to really win on the performance front for this. It almost feels like they want power to be their exclusive in a roundabout way of like, this is the incentive to coming here, or one of the incentives to coming to Xbox to play games. But around that, there's a lot of speculation around, what they're going to do with the Series X and S, price range, and just the agreements with Steam and Epic Game Store, and how that's going to kind of converge into one cohesive experience. And of course, on top of it all, especially in the context of what we just talked about with PlayStation pulling out of the PC space, is now you have them stepping more into the PC space with this hybrid. So where do you sit with it? Not just as an Xbox fan, but also in the context of where this sort of intersects with PlayStation, what they're kind of doing.
I think it's an interesting approach. I definitely think it's an approach that they're doing out of necessity, not being able to kind of live in the same console space as PlayStation, and having to divert their efforts into possibly being more a PC type of thing, And I think it's smart. I think if they're able to kind of secure Epic Game Store and Steam, I think that they'll have a hell of a machine on their hands, right? Especially because it could still play console games. But it's definitely uncharted territory, and it feels like they are looking to find their niche again, and it's not in the traditional console space. But I wonder what that's going to be like, because PC is tough. I think that when you're looking at putting yourself in that space, when you think about PC, there's not really a lot about when it comes to software on PCs that is exclusive to PC, right? You got the Steam games, the games that are like the smaller games that you can play on Steam, sure, but it just feels like you're venturing into this side of gaming. But is there something there for you as a console maker, is my question.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about it too, but I'm really interested in seeing if they can pull this off, because I do think that as PC gaming has continued to be on the rise, it does make sense in principle for them to kind of see if they can leverage that to their advantage. Obviously, being the home of Windows, I'm not saying Windows is a great OS by any means, but you may as well see what you can do while you're there. I just think it comes down to execution at the end of the day. It starts with execution, making sure that it's a great user experience for people who are console-centric, and that they're not walking into this feeling overwhelmed.
But who is this for? Because if you have a PC, you can play Xbox games on there. And if you're a console gamer, sure, and you're not a PC player, you'll have access to Steam. But now you're going to pay a premium for that console in terms of what the rumors are for pricing as well. So I don't know. I don't know if this feels like a step into we're going to be this big console PC hybrid, and we're going to stand alone on top of this mountain that nobody is fucking with us there. Because it just feels like it's an add-on, it's an additional thing, a nice to have rather than a must have, you know?
Yeah, I think to answer the question, now I'm going to caveat this by saying I'm not sure if I'm going to get one, but I'm probably in that target audience for them, and here's why. I've always been interested in PC gaming. I just don't want the PC gaming experience. I don't want to wrestle with Windows on a direct level like that. I want something that is more approachable. I do not want to jump through any sort of hoops to connect my PC to my TV and have some big, massive thing sitting next to my TV that my daughter could knock over. I don't want to deal with drivers. I don't want to deal with any of that stuff. And so if you're telling me that I can have an entry point into PC gaming with a powerful console, and I don't have as many headaches to deal with because it's automating and streamlining a lot of the under the hood stuff that I don't want. And if it's also doing what they started doing for the ROG Xbox Ally, which is they optimize graphics settings for you if you buy the game from the Xbox store. Now I don't have to tweak and twerk, right? Yeah. Which is another headache I have to avoid. So I think it's approachable for someone like me. I'm not by any means saying this is some mass market mainstream success waiting to happen. I think it's definitely niche for people who are like me, who are looking for more of a convenient access point to PC gaming, a la what the Steam Machine is doing, but with a little bit more power under the hood than what the Steam Machine is offering, which I really am compelled by. Yeah, so
for me,
that's huge.
For me, it's like a technical question where if I have an Xbox, a new Xbox, I have a Helix, cool. I buy a game. Is that game a PC game or is it an Xbox game? And if it is an Xbox native game, is it going to take advantage of the PC version of the game graphically? Are those two things going to marry, or am I playing all these games that are going to come out on Xbox Helix? Are they just going to be PC games at that point? And then if they are all PC games, am I going to suffer from optimization issues? Because not only are these people making games have to optimize for thousands of different configuration of computers, they're also going to have to configure for the new Xbox as well, which will have its own standard configuration. So now I'm dealing with the technical questions, which I don't know how that works specifically, but I do know that the separation of SKUs in terms of a console game and a PC game, they're not usually married together, that they're going to take advantage of each other's, operating systems or even power. So I'm interested to see how that works.
Well, it depends on what you want, though, because if you're someone who looks for more flexibility, I can see how this could be interesting, because now you get to decide, I want to play this game at 150 frames per second. Right. So I have the ability to drop this down, to lower that setting, to do this, so that I'm not kind of governed by the developer to say, you get a 30 FPS mode and a 60 FPS mode. Pick your poison. So it's more for people who want that flexibility, I think. And now, if you don't have a problem with choosing between preset modes, then, obviously this might not be an option for you. But I think if you have something like a great monitor or a really good TV that can handle better refresh rates, and you're like, well, I want to get my money's worth out of that. So maybe having a piece of hardware that can do that, and I can plop it in my living room and it not, be gigantic and be a headache, and driver hell can accomplish that. I can see how that can be interesting. But again, I'm in no way am I saying this is going to be some mainstream hit. Yeah. I think it's really for that audience who wants a more convenient access point to PC gaming in some capacity. Yeah. But it all comes down to execution, like you're alluding to, and messaging. And I think that's the other thing I wanted to get into is Asha Sharma really has to manage the messaging as much as possible and really be almost the point person. Anything that leaves that company and reaches us should have to be signed off by her, at least in the early goings. Because as we know with the last regime, and not trying to throw Phil and Sarah under the bus, liked them for what they were able to accomplish, for sure. And they did a lot of good things.
No, for sure.
But one of the things that wasn't so great was knowing where things stood and getting a very clear articulation of that. So I think she's got the pitch is everything now, more than ever.
I do think that that's a challenge for them, because when the messaging started to go crazy and kind of fell off in terms of can we even believe them, is when they started changing their sort of approach to what their console gaming is going to be like. And so I'm not sure that Xbox knows exactly how they're going to market this. So I don't think we're going to hear from them about this for a while. But I hope that when they do finally talk about it, that it's like you said, a uniform sort of approach to what they're trying to do, and be very clear as to what this is. If this is basically a Steam machine, a PC that has the ability to play console games from Xbox Series X and Xbox One, but everything that's going to come out new is just going to be a PC game, they need to be clear about that, because that's one of the things that the ROG Ally, when it came out, that messaging was shaky too. As like, can I play native Xbox games off of this?
That's a good point. Yeah.
You aren't able to, but they really didn't say anything about that. They made it seem like a handheld Xbox at first, and then it turns out it's just PC and they're all PC versions of the game. So the messaging with that, and it's very tricky because they have people like me and thousands of millions of people who don't really understand the way all this works, and they have to be able to market to the PC guy who knows what's up, and the person who doesn't know how this works.
Has to be foolproof. Yeah. Has to be 100% foolproof. You can't sit this in front of a casual who doesn't know what they're doing, right. and then they run into one Windows based problem, and now they're down the rabbit hole there. So
which goes back to the whole thing where it's like PlayStation console game. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really is that. I mean, that's why I said, like, if flexibility is what you want, then this could get you, interested. But if you just need a console to be a console, then obviously the more traditional paths like PlayStation 5 or even Switch 2 are much more viable. I would even say Steam Machine in a way is as well, because of how much that OS is doing for you under the hood to make it as console-like as humanly possible. I don't think that, at least from what I've heard, that Microsoft has done as good of a job getting the full screen experience of Xbox at the level that Steam OS is, and they have to work on that too before this goes live. I think the other thing that is swirling around, and it does interact with PlayStation in this way, is exclusivity, right? Not only are they having to kind of figure out Project Helix's hardware path and how they message that, but part of that messaging is also, is exclusives going to be in some form or fashion back in play, to a lesser extent, to a full extent. And obviously PlayStation has reaped the benefits of this new strategy of Xbox for the last couple of years now, but what do we think there? I mean, how do they have to tackle that?
I think there's no chance that it goes back to exclusivity, which is why they're doing this, which is why they're expanding the way they're approaching console gaming. They're going to PC. So on that alone, obviously, it might be a console exclusive, but I don't even think that's going to happen. I don't. I think what Sarah Bond said about this being a premium thing, I think that's still true. There was a report that came out that this has been in the works, or a version of this, for the last 16 years to a certain extent. This is kind of the end game. This is where they wanted to end up eventually. And so I don't think that there's going to be a time where there's going to be any sort of Xbox only game. I do think that they might flirt a little bit with time exclusives like they're doing with Forza Horizon. But yeah, I don't think there's a world where Xbox goes back to exclusivity.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation that's stirring up about this, because I think, and this is where I think the brands PlayStation and Xbox are doing a lot of talking, not to each other, but just internally about like, how do we deal with the concept of exclusivity? We see PlayStation pulling PC games. We see Xbox at least hearing out the argument of exclusivity again, at the very least, right? And I think what's interesting here is, and tell me if you agree, like, I don't think that Xbox wants PlayStation to be able to point at the PS5 and say, this is a better Xbox. I also don't think PlayStation wants Xbox to unveil the Project Helix and go, this is a more powerful PlayStation.
Right.
So that's why they pulled PC support, I think, in part, not because they're afraid of Xbox per se, but I think they just don't want to gift wrap them something like, it could also play our games too, and probably better than what the PS5 Pro is, especially if we hold back the launch of the PS6, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
so it feels like they're both jockeying for sort of positions right now where they're sharing, but not too much. There's a little bit of overlap, but not too much. And so I guess I say all that to say I can see a future where the exclusives on Xbox could be a little bit more prevalent again. I can see Clockwork Revolution staying Xbox PC exclusive. State of Decay 3. Maybe you want to keep that exclusive, maybe not. I don't know. But you can maybe justify keeping that there. If there's ever a Psychonauts 3, does that need to be, I don't know. Maybe you start deciding what can stay and what can go based on popularity, mainstream appeal, things like that. So that there's at least a little something over there in the corner that you can say, that's still for you over there, Xbox fans.
Yeah.
You can at least have that. I would like to see them do something to that effect and give Xbox fans a little exclusive or two.
If it is a premium product, a product to where, this is going to be the system for those who are hardcore fans of PC gaming and Xbox and want to experience this new way of experiencing video games. The exclusivity, you're closing that out to such a small group of people. That's why I don't think that the exclusivities are going to exist anymore.
Well, yeah. Well, I partially agree, but I guess what I'm saying is maybe that's why what they could keep exclusive are not like the earth-shattering franchises that
Gotcha.
you want. Like, you can keep something that's a little bit more niche exclusive to the console. You don't need to put, let's say, South of Midnight, right? That didn't really need to go to PlayStation, right? So in the future, maybe you say, okay, we keep some of those smaller games exclusive to us. It's a nice little art house, kind of, not art house, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like a little smaller,
game,
but more artistic, or a Clockwork or something like that. You go, okay, that's just PC and Xbox. No one on PlayStation has any hooks dug into that franchise anyway right now, so they're not losing out on anything. Whereas if we took away Fallout, then obviously the earth shakes, right? So that's kind of what I mean.
Okay. That makes
to your
sense.
point. That might be a good happy medium, if that makes sense. Lots of things to kind of keep an eye out for, man. But I am passively interested.
Yeah.
In seeing what they do. I mean, I'm content with PlayStation, obviously, but I'm certainly not one of those you can only have one or the other people. I don't see a reason to, I don't know why people have such a hard time with the notion of you can like PlayStation, still want an Xbox. You can do that. Like, so many people feel like you have to choose between one or the other.
Yeah.
And I get that from if you only have enough money to choose one, then that's a decision.
Sure.
But, like when people stigmatize you as not being a real PlayStation fan because you're interested in an Xbox, well, I don't know what we're talking about at that point.
At the end of the day, it's video games, and if I can afford all the consoles to be able to even just own them, because I am such a big fan of video games, I don't care about redundancy. I just like my consoles. That is what it is. That's being a fan of video games. Do we prefer PlayStation? Sure. But does that mean that we're going to not even look at an Xbox because the PlayStation is going to get jealous? No, that's not the way that works. So.
And I think it's just too much social media, no names trying to tell you how to feel about what you should like and not like. And just kind of, bully you out of what you're interested in, or shame you for it if you are so bold to say, I'm having a good time playing an Xbox game on Xbox. And it's like, you just lit a fire in their house. It's so strange. But hopefully we at this podcast can be a nice little breather from all that noise on social.
Respite.
Absolutely. But look, I think we got through everything in our case file this week. But before we file this episode away, please be sure to follow our show to catch new episodes every single Tuesday. But in the meantime, really appreciated having you here. We hope that you enjoyed your conversation with us today. And of course, stay safe, save often, play on, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Peace out.